Hi, today we're going to be looking at how to create a prototype in Figma. Figma is a tool that allows us as developers and designers to create low fidelity wireframes, prototypes, and test ideas for websites and web apps before we actually invest in building them. And the goal of today's tutorial is to create 3 screens from a design for a mobile app. It's a book borrowing app that we can actually use to test our ideas. So we're going to turn these 3 screens into an interactive prototype, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Figma allows you to link up your different designs to form an approximation of what a final experience could look like for a user. So on the screen here we see this mobile app as it would be seen by someone browsing on their mobile device, and we've made these category names here clickable so that you can actually click them or tap them on a mobile phone screen to simulate the experience of what it will be like to use the final product. So that's what we're going to be making today. And the first step of the tutorial is to actually make an account at figma.com, and then we're going to go there and log in. Cool. So when you log in, you should see a screen like this. Yours might be empty if this is your first time using Figma, because you won't have any pre-existing projects. We're going to click this button here in the top right corner, New File, to create a new project. Great, so this is our empty project. There are 3 panels in the Figma UI that I'll direct your attention to. The first is this whole panel here on the left. This is the Layers panel, and it's going to contain all of the elements that we add to our prototype. This top black bar here is the main toolbar. This contains all of the tools that we're going to use to add and draw things in our prototype. And this panel here on the right hand side is the Properties panel, which allows us to edit the properties of anything that's in our prototype. We can style it, we can change fonts, colors, size, positioning. So the first thing that we want to do actually is create 3 roughly mobile phone sized shapes that can represent our mobile phone screens. And the way to do that is to go over to the main toolbar and to click on the frame tool. And we can draw a frame and we can make it any size we like, but if I just Command Z to undo that, if we click on the frame tool again, over in the properties panel we get a list of pre-existing screen sizes for popular devices, and we're going to select the iPhone 8 as our screen size. So doing that gives us an iPhone 8 sized frame, and you can see the dimensions over here. It's 375 pixels by 667. So what we want to do now is to copy that frame twice so that we have 3 of them. So one way to copy is Command C and then Command V to paste. And we can do that again to paste it twice. Another way to copy in Figma is to hold down on Mac, it's the Option key, and if you click and drag while holding the Option key, you can drag a duplicate of the element that you're copying. So we're going to do that. And now we want to actually rename our frames so that they make a little bit more sense. So over here on the left we've got the Layers panel, and at the moment we've just got 3 frames called iPhone 8, 1, 2 and 3. So we want to change those to be a bit more descriptive. So let's call our first frame on the left Home Dev Books. And if I just go back to our complete prototype, that's going to be this frame here, which shows our book sharing app on the category development. So we're looking at books related to web development. In the middle here, we're going to call this Home Design Books, and on the right hand side this panel is called Home Other Books, for books in any category that isn't development or design. Great. So if we look back at our prototype again, we've got 3 UI elements here to replicate. We've got a main navbar, we've got a category navbar, and we've got an image carousel. But before we actually start adding those, it's always a good idea to add layout grids to your frames, which allow us to get the spacing right. So if you click on a frame, and if you come over to the properties panel on the right, and if you go to the section that says layout grid, you can click the plus sign next to layout grid. And this is going to add a grid with 10 pixel by 10 pixel squares to our frame. We don't really want to use a 10 pixel by 10 pixel square grid. It's a little bit too small. So what we can do is click on the icon next to our 10 pixel grid here in the properties panel. And if we go onto the pop-up that appears and click the drop-down menu, we want to change grid to columns. So these red columns here are just to help us when we're positioning elements on our screen. And let's change the column count from 5 to 6. At the moment, there is no margin, which is the space between the sides of the screen and the outermost column. So let's change the margin to 20 pixels. And then we want to change the gutter to be a little bit less. So the gutter is the space between the columns. Let's change that to 10. And let's do the same for the other two frames that we've created. So we select the frame, we come on over to layout grid on the right, we change the layout type to columns, and we'll just change the number of rows, the columns to 6, we'll change the margin to 20, and the gutter is, it should be 10. There we go. And let's do it one more time for other. There we go. Great. So we're ready to start adding UI elements to our prototype. So the first element I think we want to create is this nav bar. So in Figma, you have a bunch of tools that allow you to draw shapes, different objects, rectangles, circles, arrows, lines, and you can, in theory, just draw any icon that you like from scratch. So we could draw that menu icon that appears in the top left corner of our prototype. But for rapid prototyping's sake, let's say we want to get this prototype made quickly and we want to do it so that we can start testing it with users. We can actually use a plugin. Figma recently in 2019 added support for plugins. So if we go over to the top level toolbar and we click on the menu icon, and then the drop down menu that comes down, you want to go to plugins, and we're going to go to manage plugins to install a new plugin. Plugins are third-party modules that add functionality to Figma, and the one that we're going to use is called Iconify. So if you search in the screen that appears for a plugin called Iconify, the icon's a smiley face, and we want to click install. So this plugin, and it should install pretty much instantaneously, this plugin will allow us to import icons from outside of Figma into Figma so that we don't have to make them ourselves. So now that we've installed Iconify, if we go back to the plugins menu, we'll see Iconify appears on our list of plugins. And if we click on that Iconify, we can see a window appears on the right hand side of the screen. So we want to find a menu icon. So let's search for menu. And we can pick any of these that we like. I'm going to go with the second one. And we just drag and drop onto our frame. Cool. That looks way too big. So we can resize that by holding Shift and clicking the corner to just resize that to make it closer to the size that we want it to be. We don't have to worry about the exact size for now. We also want to find a search icon to find a magnifying glass. So let's search for that. And then when you found one you like, you can click to drag and drop that. Again, we'll resize that. If you hold down Shift while you click and drag the corner of an element, it will keep the width and height in proportion. Great. So, what's happened here? What on earth has gone on there? Okay, I'm not sure why that frame shrunk all of a sudden. Let's just copy that frame again. Okay, and let's rename it to Home Other Books. Okay, so now that we've got our menu icon and our search icon, we want to resize them to their proper size. We're going to go with 24 pixels by 24 pixels. So we can go over to the properties panel and we can manually edit the pixels for width and the pixels for height. That's great. We want to do the same for the search icon. So again, we can manually edit the pixels for width and height. Because width and height are both the same, if we click this icon, constrain proportions, when we edit one, it's going to automatically edit the other in proportion to the other. Okay. So we want to make sure that the icons aren't encroaching on the margin that we set. And when you drag, you should see a line that indicates when you can snap that icon to the edge of the margin at the edge of the page. And then we also want to make sure that there's a bit of top margin, which we can do if you click on the element and you hold down shift and you press the down arrow on your keyboard, it's going to shift that element down by 10 pixels. So let's have space of 10 pixels from the top of the page, and we've got our margin of 20 pixels, so that should be fine. Great. Okay, now we want to create the page title. We can do that by using the text tool in the top toolbar. Click the text tool, create a text box, drag and drop, and we're going to call our app Fact Shelf. Okay. If we go over to the properties panel with that text box selected, there's a section called text which we can use to change the properties of that text. We're going to keep the font the same, but we're going to change the weight to bold. And we're also going to change the font size from 12 to about 18. That looks much better. We can also change the size of the text box. We want the box to fit the content, so we don't want the box to be any bigger than the content that it contains. The way to do this is in the text section. If you click on the three dots to open up more options, in the resizing section we want to click grow horizontally. So now if we add more text to our text box, the box will grow, and if we delete text it will shrink automatically. So now we can just drag this and make sure that we align it with the center of the page and also our icons. And now that's essentially our navbar component. The elements are in place and we just need to change the color. So what's the hex code on this? F26969. If we click any element, and as you'll see, we've got the element selected, but we actually have a frame selected. So a frame is like a div in code speak, in HTML speak. So what we actually need to do is select the vector or the actual shape that is inside the frame. And there's an option in the properties panel to change the fill. So let's change that fill color to, what was the hex code again? F26969. So that orangey color that we see. And then rather than do the same thing again, there's a shortcut for copying styles, which is we can right click or control click to bring up this drop down menu on the element, and then we can copy properties. So if we then go over to our search icon and remember again to select the vector shape, and then if we right click and click paste properties, we've applied the color to that icon. We can't copy and paste a fill color onto the text because text, we should be able to do that as well. Yeah, so we can paste fill onto text as well. Great. So one way to replicate this navbar is to just select all of the elements. If you hit Command G, you can turn those elements into a single group, and then we could just hold down Option, click and drag to drag that group over onto our other frames. But the disadvantage of doing this is that, let's say halfway through our prototyping we decide we don't like this orange, we want to change all our nav bars to be blue instead. But now if we change this element here, it's not going to update these elements, and it's also not going to update the ones that we've copied, because these copies don't know about the original here. So there's a smarter way to manage your styling and states in Figma, and it's called it's by making components. So we can turn these elements, or this element that we've created, into a component. So I've clicked undo, and I've ungrouped those three elements. And if we just select those elements again, if we go over to this icon here in our main toolbar, create component, if we click that, this is now indicated by the purple outline, a component, and also in our layers panel we can see component 1 has appeared. If we open that up, we can see all of the individual elements that we created are inside it, and this component is a master component. So it's a bit small, but I'm going to zoom in here. You can always tell a component is a master component by these 4 diamonds next to it. So a master component is the original component, and anytime you copy that, it's going to create instances. So I'll show you what I mean by that. If we drag over into this frame, here we go. We've created a second instance of that component. This is indicated by the diamond that it's not a master component, it's an instance or a child component. And interestingly, now when we edit anything in this one, in the master, it's also going to update the instance automatically. So that's quite handy if you're working on a large prototype with lots of screens. Okay, so we're going to actually rename this master component. Let's call it navbar, and notice that the name on the instance also updates. And then let's copy it one more time over onto our third frame. So it's also good practice when you're prototyping in Figma only to use instances within your frames, within the screens that represent your app. You should keep the master components separate and outside of your frames. So we're just going to move this component up here, and then we're going to copy it down one more time so that it's in our home dev books frame. So now we've got 3 instances inside our frames, and whenever we update the master, let's just change the text color again, this time to green, it's going to update all 3 instances at once. Okay, great, so we've got one component. The next component we need to make is this category bar, and to make that we're going to draw 3 text boxes. We're going to draw 1 text box and then replicate it. So we're going to call this one design. I think we'll take away the bold weighting. We'll just put that regular. And we'll also make the font a little bit smaller. So ideally when you're prototyping, you'll also have a style guide that you're either developing at the same time or you're working from. And that's going to give you consistency across your prototype and eventually your final product. And we're going to resize this text box like we did before. We go to the text section, more options, and we're going to select grow horizontally. Great. Let's duplicate that. Let's call this one development. And then one more time, other. Okay, so we could sort of position these manually to get the spacing about right, which we can do. If, let's say, your spacing is off and you want to correct that spacing, so we want to make sure there's an equal amount of space between these three elements, we can select all of them. And if we go here to the properties panel and we click on this icon with three vertical lines, the arrow next to it, we can click on distribute horizontal spacing to do that for us. And then we just want to make sure that that's positioned in the center of our frame. Okay, I think there's also one more element on that we need to add, which is the underline. So what we can do is use another tool at the top in the main toolbar under shape tools. If you click the drop down arrow, we're not going to select rectangle, we're going to select the line tool. We're just going to draw a straight line underneath the word. So we can drag that across. And I'll make that a bit longer. And again, we'll drag that across. Now, let's just line that up. Okay, it's not snapping. The orange snap lines that were appearing before aren't appearing, and that's because the line is actually not inside our home dev books frame. If I just close the other two frames for a second in our layers panel. So we've got home dev books, and the line is actually, even though visually it's in it, in the layers panel, it's not part of that layer. So we just want to drag that into home dev tools. And now when we move this around, it's snapping again like it should. And I'm just going to resize that line as well. So always keep an eye on your layers panel if something doesn't look how it should. And now what we want to do is actually create the effect of these two elements, design and other, being deselected. So how we can do that is we could do it manually. But then it would be a little bit tricky to control that state. So we'd have to then, if we were to, let's say, make this grey, and we were to do that with the line, and then let's say we make this into a component, okay, and then let's say we copy this across. Well, now, if we want to actually make sure that on this frame, this is now black and the other two are grey, well, we have to do that manually. So what we can do instead is, we undo that. What we want to do is select design and the underline underneath by shift clicking so that both are selected. Then we want to group them. So Command G is the shortcut for grouping, or we can right click and click group selection. So we've got that now grouped, and we want to make a copy of that. And on the copy, we're going to change the fill and the stroke to change the color of the word and the color of the line. And then we're just going to put that back directly on top of the original. So here in the layers panel, we've got group 2, which is design inactive. And in the layers panel, you can hide or show a layer using this eyeball icon. If you click it, it disappears. So now underneath that, we have group 1. Let's call that design active. So we're going to put both the state for inactive and active inside the master component for our category bar. And then whenever we copy that across, we can just show or hide whichever one applies to the frame that we're using it on. So let's do the same for development and other. Shift click to select them both, then press Command and G to group them. We've got a group. Let's call it development active. Let's Alt click and drag, or Command C and Command V to copy and paste it. And let's call the copy development inactive, and let's change the styling. I'm turning it to grey to indicate inactivity. And then once we've done that, let's just put it on top again, and let's do the same for other. So Command and Shift, or sorry, Shift and click to select them both. We're going to right click, group selection, and then we're going to Command C to copy, Command V. Okay, I did Command V. Has it copied it on top? Yes, it has. Okay. And then let's change the color. Let's call this other inactive. And let's call the first one other active. And then let's move that on top. Okay. So we want development to be active to begin with. So we just hide development inactive, and there we go. Right, now we're ready to create a component out of this. So we can drag a box around everything to select everything we've made. We go up to the top toolbar and we click Create Component, and there it is. Let's call this component, let's call it cat bar, short for category bar. And then, as before, we just want to click, Alt, and drag across onto another frame, and we want to do the same again. And remember, it's good to keep master components separate from the frames. So let's put the master component outside and then create one more instance. Okay. If you ever want to know how much space exists between two elements in pixels, you can hold down the Alt button, and if you've got an element selected while holding Alt and you hover over another element, it will show you how much space is between them. So we can see there's 30 pixels. So let's just go over to our other frame and make sure that we have 30 pixels, and we don't. So if while holding Alt you press the down arrow, you can nudge this element down by a pixel at a time. So now we've got 30 there. And if we do the same here, again we need to nudge this down by 3 pixels. Okay, so that's looking good so far. The final component that we want to add to our prototype is this image carousel. So if you notice in the complete version, the middle book cover is slightly larger than the other two book covers. So I'll show you how we can make that happen. So what we want to do is we're going to create 3 rectangles, and we're going to place the images as fills inside those rectangles. So over here on the in the main toolbar, we're going to go to where the line tool is, and we're going to click on the down arrow, and this time we are going to select the rectangle tool. Let's draw a rectangle, and using the properties panel to change the width and the height, we're going to change the width to 220, and we're going to change the height to 220. And let's position this in the middle. Right, we're going to duplicate that square, but the duplicates are going to be slightly smaller. The duplicates are going to be 200 by 200. Like so. And then we just want to make sure that this square is lined up in the middle horizontal or vertically of the center square. And again, it's not snapping, and that's because this rectangle that we've got isn't inside our home dev books frame. So we need to drag this rectangle inside, and now we can line it up. And same with this rectangle, we just want to drag it inside home dev books, making sure that the spaces in between our columns are free of the rectangle. Okay, and you'll notice that the rectangle, even the overlap, is visible. So we don't really want to see any part of that rectangle that extends beyond our frame. So if you click on a frame, and on the properties panel under the frame section, there's a checkbox called clip content, and we just want to make sure that that's enabled, and that's going to clip away any overlap. Okay, so to add an image, we can click on the shape. If we go to the fill section, at the moment we see it's got a grey background fill. We can leave that there, but we can click the plus button to add a new fill. And if we click on the fill type, you'll see by default it's linear. But if we open up this color selection panel, and at the top we can change the fill type from linear to image. And then we can choose an image, and we're going to choose an image that I've already downloaded, and you can access this image in the book covers folder of the GitHub repo. So it contains all of the book covers we use in this component. And I can't remember what book cover we use. I think it's Eloquent JavaScript. But if we click that, it adds it. It's not the right size. We want the book cover to fit within the rectangle. So to change that, we just select size type. The sizing options here, we select fit from the drop down menu. So that's that. And if we like, we can also just make this grey background invisible too. We're going to do the same for the others. So we're going to select the square. We're going to add a new fill. We're going to change the type from linear to image. And we're going to select a book. And one of the development books is fine. Design patterns will do. As we can see, the book cover is also extending beyond the frame. So we want to just change fill to fit. If we want to bring this book cover over to the right a little bit more, if we just drag and drop, it moves the whole rectangle. But if we change the size type from fit to crop, now we can actually drag the fill within the frame. So I'm just going to nudge this over till it's in line with our column. Okay, so that's all sorted, and then we're going to do the same for this box. Let's choose Learning Python. And that's that. So again, we could turn this into a component now and then copy it onto our other frames, but we're going to use a similar technique to actually show or hide different book covers depending on which frame we're using it in. So we're going to put all of the book covers for the other categories into these elements, and then when we copy them across, we're just going to hide or show the ones that we need to. So for Eloquent JavaScript, so the middle column is always going to be the selected column. So in this frame, development is selected. But in this frame, we actually want to make sure that design is selected. So in the category bar component, we want to make sure that development active is, where are we? Ooh, okay. I forgot to add a setting to inactivate development category in our master component. But in our design section here, we essentially want to make sure that design active is visible and that design inactive is invisible. And then over here, we want to make sure that in our third frame that we can see other active. So we're going to make sure, and if we go back to our complete prototype, that a different book cover is visible in each frame. So we're going to add all of the book covers to our first set of elements, and then when we turn that into a component, we'll just make each one of these fills visible or invisible. So let's do that, and I'm going to skip ahead now until I've done that. I'll show you the first one and then I'll skip ahead. So we can add a new fill on top of our image fill, and we can also change that fill to an image. We're going to choose a different image. We're going to choose a design book. So let's choose Web Design for Dummies, and let's make it fit the rectangle. And then now we can see Web Design for Dummies is visible, but if we toggle the visibility, Eloquent JavaScript is visible. So we're going to add the other books, one more here, we're going to add more here, and we're going to end up with a component that contains 9 book covers. I'm going to skip ahead now and show you that when it's done. So I fast forwarded ahead and I've added all of the book covers to our image carousel. You can see here we've got 3 images stacked on top of one another. And now we're just going to convert this whole thing into one component by selecting everything and clicking the Create Component icon. Our new component has appeared. In our Layers panel, let's rename it and let's call it Carousel. And remember, this is a master component, so we want to duplicate this 3 times. Once, twice, and then one final time, because we're going to move our master component outside of our frame. There we go. And now we've got all of those components in place. We just need to deactivate or select the visibility settings on each one and just make sure that only the book that we want is visible. So in this rectangle, I'm going to deactivate the top 2 books because those aren't development books. And same for the others. Okay, so that's how we want. Oh, I've accidentally put the same book cover in there twice, but that's okay. That's how we want our first frame to look. I accidentally selected the wrong frame because I haven't set the clip content to be on for the second frame. There was some overlap there. So in our first frame, we want to deactivate the first 2 layers. And then we want to do the same in our second frame. And this time we want to make sure that the web design book is visible and that the other 2 aren't visible. And then let's do the same in our final frame. Okay. And that is pretty much it. We can disable the columns by just clicking the eyeball icon, select the frame, go to layout grid, and just set the columns to be invisible. And we've created the prototype. We just need to link up the screens now, and this is the easiest step of all. If you go to the prototype tab in the properties panel, and then if you select any element in a frame, you'll see that there's this bluish white dot that appears next to it. So this indicates that you can drag and drop to another frame to make that element clickable. an arrow appears telling you which frame clicking that element will take the user to. So we want to make sure that we select our inactive elements in our first frame, and we just want to drag and drop that bluish dot to create an arrow to the frame to which it applies. So for our design button, we want that to take the user to the middle frame when it's been clicked. And we want to actually, so design inactive, there we go, that's the setting I didn't have enabled. So we want to make sure that design, yes, we want design to be active, and development actually, we want that to be inactive. Oops, let's change that really quickly. There we go. So we want development to take us back to the first frame, and we want other to take us to the last frame. And on our last frame, we want development again, we want that to be inactive. I forgot to add that earlier. We want development to take us back to the first frame, and if we click on the design icon, a button, we just want that to take us back to the second frame. And then you can see all the lines that link up now, and if we go to the top right, this play button will allow us to see how our prototype looks on a mobile screen. And there you go.